Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to you. Let me just give you a little bit of background on myself. I wasn't actually initially going to talk about short selling, which would have been a great topic a month ago at the peak of the market. But I think the combination of the market falling and, I don't think, generally speaking, short selling is a very, very tough business. But I don't think it makes a lot of sense to be spending much time on the short side with so many cheap stocks out there. Number one, and two, just talking about the current market and the coronavirus and how that might play out, I think is a much more timely topic. So that's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. So just a little bit of background. So basically, I went to Harvard Business School. My parents were both teachers, so I never had any interest in investing, but I knew I was interested in business, wanted to be an entrepreneur. And long story short, in the late 90s, stocks were going up. It was sort of a similar period to the last 10 years, up to about a month ago, when I first started getting into investing. And it seemed so easy. Every stock I picked went up. And I was a classic bull market genius and filled with hubris that comes from 2 Harvard degrees, decided to start my own hedge fund out of my bedroom. As you might be able to see from the background here, I'm still working out of home 20 years later. But had a heck of a run, learned fast, even though I had no idea what I was doing when I started. I cultivated the right mentors. Bill Ackman, as I said, was as you heard in the video, was a friend from college, remains a good friend to this day. And he was much more interested in investing and much more knowledgeable than I was, even as a teenager. So I learned a lot from him, learned a lot from Warren Buffett, and read all the classics, and was really very self-taught. And the 90s were a good time for value investing. A classic long, short value investing strategy worked pretty well. I identified and pretty much nailed the internet bubble and the bursting of the housing bubble. And so I had a great 12 years. And then this long bull market, again, up to about a month ago, really, I never figured it out properly. I was always fearful of another downturn, positioned my fund defensively, and for 10 long years, for 8 long years anyway, until I got frustrated and decided to close my fund, because that was absolutely the wrong positioning. It's sort of, I sort of chuckle ironically at this point that my fund was positioned for the last month for the last 10 years. That chronically trailing the market got fatiguing for me and my investors, and I was just miserable. And so I figured there's something better I could do. And so closed my funds, returned capital, and have been having a lot of fun with my investment newsletter business, where I advise people who want to manage their own money. But basically I'm doing, my day-to-day job is actually quite similar. Where I'm out there looking at the markets, looking at stocks, trying to find the occasional severely underpriced situation. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm very, very happy doing it. And the last month or so has really underscored for me why I like being in my current business rather than actually running a hedge fund. Because if I were running a hedge fund right now and seeing my stocks getting hammered, I remember what it was like in 2008. That's the only sort of closest analogy. Maybe if you go back to tech stocks back in 2000 to 2002. When you're losing your friends and family money, even if you're outperforming the market, if you're losing less than the market, it still is pretty painful. And by not actually running a fund and running other people's money, I feel like I can be more objective today, not get as emotional, and give my investors, give my subscribers better advice than I would if I, had a lot of skin in the game and were actually managing their money. So let me just conclude my remarks just with some quick thoughts on the market today. As recently as a week ago, I thought this coronavirus was overblown and people were overreacting and all. I no longer think so. I think it is appropriate what countries are doing right now to basically, at least for a couple of weeks, hold on just a second, there's some noise. Let me close my window here. Sorry about the background noise. For at least a short period of time, I think we're all going to need to change our behavior to see if we can put a stop to this, because the evidence is that left unchecked, unless we all change our behavior, the coronavirus spreads at an exponential rate, and is at least 10 times more deadly than the seasonal flu, about a 1% mortality rate at best. In Italy, it's hard to know if they've captured all the cases, but Italy right now is reporting somewhere, depending on whether you just look at it on a day-to-day basis or on a cumulative basis, something around a 5 to 6% mortality rate. In Wuhan, China, where this whole thing started, the mortality rate was a little over 4%. I think ultimately it will end up probably being closer to 1% once we know the denominator correctly, how many people get infected, because a lot of people don't know they're infected or because they only have mild symptoms. But the combination of very rapid spread and much higher mortality than like this super dangerous. Europe and the United States anyway are going to be able to get a handle on this, and that as in China, as in Korea, which were sort of the first two countries to get hit hard, it did not spread to 50% of the population, as some doomsday folks are saying, but rather the number of new cases plateaued within 2 to 3 weeks and started to decline, and things. But that was only because of very strong action. And it's not clear whether things will be able to return completely to normal. So let me just conclude with showing you a couple of charts. Here for me to put the chart somehow up on the screen, at least the way we're set up. So I printed them out. I'm going to hold them up, and these are charts that were in the email that I sent around last night that I asked the organizers of this to forward to all of you. So you guys may all have seen this. It'd be impossible for you to see it, but basically it shows Italy as the lead country right here, and what we're measuring here is number of confirmed coronavirus cases per million. And Italy was the first Western country to get hit, and you can see it going up exponentially here. All of the other lines here are basically all of the other European countries and the United States and Canada in here. You can see sort of the cluster of lines following Italy. In other words, everyone is following the same trajectory as Italy, including the UK and the United States. So that's why countries, but it's on a lag. The other thing I want to point out is all of the other lines are a lot in Italy, because all the other countries are anywhere from 5 days, which would be Denmark, 3 days, the case of Norway. You guys in the UK are 15 days behind, and 15 days. So in other words, we're sort of lucky. Just by randomness, we've got a couple weeks to see what's happening in Italy and to take appropriate steps to make sure we don't go the way of Italy. I don't know if you guys have any Italian friends who are following the news, but it is a major catastrophe going on in Italy right now. Hospitals completely overwhelmed, 5+% mortality rates, and the entire country. I was sort of curious when I logged in today whether I would see anybody in the audience or whether this would be in every university in the United States now has shut down, pretty much every public school, K through 12 schools, and you would not see a room full of students like this, like you guys right now. Certainly anywhere in Italy, very rapidly across Europe, and you wouldn't see it in the United States. It's very interesting to see how Boris Johnson is playing this. where as recently as yesterday or 2 days ago, he was saying, you know, let what's the word, group immunity by letting a lot of people get it. And yes, some people will die, but we will be better off in the long run. Most experts said, you're out of your mind. You're going to have 1 million people dead if you go that route. And as recently as 15 minutes ago, I just saw a breaking news headline is rapidly changing his view. So my confident prediction is this will be the last time you guys all sit in a room together for a little while. And you should be happy about that because, you know, in light of the tremendous uncertainty, right, to halt it, it's better to just take a couple weeks off and work remotely, et cetera, you know, even though the economic consequences may be fairly severe. So this is chart number 1. And it's pretty sobering, and it explains why everybody is free. And every country is following Italy unless we do something pretty dramatic to stop it. The good news is this is China, and it has 2 things on the chart here. One chart shows in China, and you can see it spiking up and then coming right back down to where it is today. The good news is China was on the same exponential growth curve. We concentrated in Wuhan city, which is a city of 11 million people in a province, Hubei province, of 60 million people. China initially didn't realize what they had on their hands. That took a month or 2. Then when they did have of it, and they took dramatic action, you know, that only really an authoritarian police state can do. But the good news is they got a handle on it, and the number of cases came crashing back down. And is why I'm optimistic as an investor, and why as recently as 10 minutes ago, right before I got on this phone call, I was out there buying stocks. The US stock market is down almost 10%. On the day this afternoon. It's down more than 30% or almost 30% from its highs. As an investor, I haven't been this excited in 12 years, since late 2008, early 2009. So the good news is by the way, is look at what happened to the Chinese stock market. The very day that the coronavirus new cases peaked is the very day their stock market bottomed. And you can see as the number of new cases came down, it rallied. And in fact, the Shanghai Stock Exchange is the single best performing major exchange in the world this year, despite China having been completely shut down due to this virus. So my best guess is stock markets and the US stock markets will follow this trajectory. In other words, they're probably going to keep going down. I don't know how much further. For the next couple of weeks, and I think it's at least a couple of weeks before this peaks. And then once that number starts to level off and start to decline, there'll still be more new cases, but it's a second derivative. The rate of growth will slow. At that, stock markets could rally very hard. Now, so you might ask, well, why were you buying stocks 10 minutes ago if you think it's going to be another couple of weeks? And the answer is the Chinese stock market only went down 14% before they got a handle on it, started to rally. We're down nearly 30% across the world's major markets. So I think investors are now anticipating a big spike in new cases for the next couple of weeks. It's already priced into stocks. Relative to right now, which is at this year's low as we speak this moment. I would say down another 5 to 10% will prove to be the ultimate bottom. But you know, this could be the bottom right here. So I'm putting some long-term money to work as I close my fund. So the last thing is if I think that the stock market is going to rally, and you know, it's going to bounce around as long as the new cases keep. So naturally, every day I'm tracking the number of new cases, both in the US and in the rest of the world. including China, which has virtually no new cases anymore. So that's these two charts. So that's the United States, and you can see we are on an exponential growth curve right there. But keep in mind the number, it's hard, you won't be able to read it probably, but the number there is that chart that's really freaking people out. And this is the number for the rest. This is the chart for the rest of the world. So this is would most of this, given most of this is going to be Italy, which is still just getting hammered with new cases. But it's also starting to pick up UK, Germany, France, Spain, et cetera. There are plenty of websites you can go to that track this on.
If you have your Wi-Fi on and you're not really using it, it's just that our laptop is kind of competing with your guys, and you know, it's not a Mac by any stretch of the imagination. So if you're not using your Wi-Fi, if you could just turn it off, that might help things. Sorry about that.
Okay.
With the internet problem.
So the only thing I want to point out here, so the max number right now in the US there is 700 new cases yesterday. The number down here for the rest of the world is 12,000. Not surprisingly, there are a lot more people in the rest of the world, even excluding curves. Those curves are pretty darn scary right now. But again, I remain optimistic given just in the past few days. I can't tell you the difference in the behavior and the attitude of Americans between Friday when bars and restaurants were full and today when multiple states in the United States have closed all restaurants, all non-essential, all retailers and restaurants, all gymnasiums, everything's closed as of today, except for grocery stores, pharmacies, etc. Now, it is not quite as extreme in Italy. In Italy, right now, my Italian friends are sending me videos. There is not a single, no cars, no people. Italy is a total ghost town, not just northern Italy. My friends in southern Italy, where they don't have any cases yet, there's not a single person out on the streets. That, by the way, was the situation in China, in Wuhan and in Hubei province, not all of the rest of China, but though there were restrictions elsewhere also. Not as much traffic as usual. Some businesses are still open, but we're definitely, you know, the hope is for real. Even just do it on a small scale is I think a very important part of learning. But what's most important though is you need to find someone to hire you. So let me finish my diatribe here by talking about, well, how do you get a job? And what do I look for in looking to hire? And look, I'm looking for stock jockeys. I'm looking for people who just are really passionate about investing, who on vacation bring the Wall Street Journal and read about business and companies and stocks, that they just live, eat, and breathe it. And if I ask them, hey, what do you think of Spotify? They know something about Spotify, not the service, but the company. Hey, you know, what do you think about Apple here? You know, what do you think about Alibaba, one of the Chinese giants? You know, you think Anheuser-Busch InBev and what the 3G guys have done with Anheuser-Busch InBev and Kraft Heinz. Well, you better know who the 3G guys are, or, you know, I'm not going to, this interview is going to be a very short one, right? In other words, there's a language, there's a body of knowledge that just comes from being interested in business and investing and knowing companies and knowing, I mean, you know, having studied at least a little bit of Tesla and why that stock is so controversial and having something sensible to say about it. So, you know, I just hired an analyst a couple months ago, and he was a young guy, 2 years out of college, and he just blew me away. We were just shooting the shit like two old veterans, and I'm bringing up this stock and that stock and even some obscure stuff. And he knew it all. He just blew me away. It was the no-brainer decision of my life to hire that guy, right? So if you want to get a job at a stock picking kind of place, then having, you know, just having that knowledge, accumulating that knowledge and background And by the way, if I ask you, hey, what's the biggest position in your personal portfolio? If you say, I don't have a personal portfolio, you fail, okay? Because how can you come to me asking for a job as a stock picker and not be picking stocks, on your own, right? So you better be able to, you better have a personal portfolio and be able to very clearly articulate, know everything. If I say, oh, okay, your biggest position is Berkshire Hathaway, tell me why. What's your insight? What is your variant perception about Berkshire Hathaway that leads you to believe the stock is undervalued and that all the other investors are making a big mistake in pricing it where it is priced today, right? I guess that's sort of a summary. The one last thing I'd add is don't just have a portfolio. If you're trying to get a job in the business, that is Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Berkshire, okay? The 6 largest stocks in the S&P 500 that every single index fund and mutual fund owns, right? In other words, show me that you can go dig around the nooks and crannies of the market and find something that isn't followed by 20 analysts, and that you've been clever and you've gone to visit some stores or talk to somebody in the industry or in the company or done something. Investing is so competitive these days, you need to have some sort of edge. And so thinking about what your edge is and taking advantage of that is key.
Okay, so what do you think separates the outstanding investors, the Buffetts, the Mungers, the Marks, the Klarmans, from just the average investor? Is it technical ability or is it emotional ability?
It's a combination of the two. I actually wrote an article, and I will send it to you when we get off this call. And again, feel free to circulate it. That was called, I forget the title of it, but it was The Traits of Successful Investors. It was, I think, the title. And I wrote it 20 years ago, but I wouldn't change a word of it today. And I went through 8 traits in 2 buckets. So to be a successful investor, you need to have a lot of skill as an investor. The tools, be able to think sensibly about businesses, be able to, run numbers and be comfortable with the numbers and have experience, etc. But then the other 8 traits are all the emotional traits. And thinking anytime you're buying a stock is you wouldn't care if the stock market closed for a year. You are buying a piece of a business and you are focusing on and so it's the emotional piece of it. And so the most successful investors have both parts of it, both the analytical side and the emotional side. And there's a reason I listed 8 characteristics on each side, because actually this most successful investors, it's equally important. Everyone's got the same basic foundational skills. Once you reach a certain level, what then differentiates people is their ability to control their emotions.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to relive some pain, unfortunately. If you could pinpoint maybe one investment that was maybe your worst, or it just turned out absolutely horribly, could you kind of give us an example, and what did you learn from it, and why do you think it was the wrong choice in the end?
Boy, there are so many. Shorting Tesla in 2013 from $35 to $205 before I finally realized it was a bad short was probably ranks up there with the most single costly investment of my investment in my career. And it was partly you don't want to get in the way of a very open-ended situation. It underscores the dangers of shorting in general, but particularly shorting something which is going after very large markets. But perhaps the biggest lesson is it wasn't that it was a bad short at 35, though it obviously was, but it's that my bet was that the company was within a week of bankruptcy, which it was. There have now been books written about that time, and they were almost out of cash. and they were just launching their new car, the Model S. And what I failed to do is when they launched the Model S, it was a hit. And I had plenty of friends who bought Model S's, and the stock doubled. And I just dug in my heels. I put up the blinders, and I never went and visited one of my friends and said, hey, take me for a ride in the Model S. And had I done so, I would have realized, holy cow, this is an incredible car. I see why all my friends love it. And I would have said, you know what? It might have been a good short at 35, but it's not a good short here at 60, because my investment thesis that they were going to go out of business is now shot to hell. So that's a it underscores a very important lesson in investing, which is you have to be willing, you have to stay mentally flexible. One of the biggest mental traps that human beings make, but particularly investors, is called commitment bias, which is once you stand up and publicly say, I love XYZ stock, and you put, particularly if you put money behind it, but it also works outside of investing. If people publicly say, I love Donald Trump, I think he's the greatest president ever, I promise you, no amount of evidence will ever convince you to change your point of view. And by the way, the reverse is also true. You know, I don't think in the history of the world there's ever been a single person who really hates Donald Trump who has changed his or her mind, right? Human beings are very, very loath to change their minds. So when they make a commitment, what they do is they then only search for confirming information, and they block out all disconfirming information. And that's very easy to do in today's world, where your news sources, you can determine what news you read on your browser. It's not like everybody reads the same newspaper, the local paper, like was true 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, right? So I see, and it's happened to me, and I really try to fight it. So let me give you a recent example. A week ago, I thought the coronavirus was totally overblown and that this was just a silly panic. Today, I've completely changed my point of view. And that's because, one, I took the blinders down. I listened to some smart friends, but also because the facts on the ground changed. Both the facts on the ground changed, but also I saw the facts on the ground. Whereas I hadn't done enough research. So thank goodness I kept an open mind. And Alexa, off. Sorry, I have an alarm going off in the background. So I urge you as to be well-functioning human beings, but especially if you're going to be investing money, you absolutely have to keep an open mind. Alexa, off. Alarm off. Sorry. Keep an open mind and be willing to admit that you were wrong, even if you've got money on the line, even if you've publicly made a commitment, because if you don't, you will be blown sky high in the investment world if you're not willing to admit you've made a mistake and get out.
Okay, so the final one for me, switching tack. It's November 4th, 2020. You've woken up and there's a new president in the United States. Who would you like that president to be? And what impact do you think they're going to have on the financial markets and the economy?
Yeah, well, look, I'm the child of parents who met and married in the Peace Corps who are very leftist. And, you know, honestly, I would say for the vast majority of people, politics is sort of like religion. You're sort of born into it. You know, some people are different from their parents, but I'd say most aren't. So, you know, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I consider myself sort of a centrist, sensible Democrat, not a far left. But I've been horrified by Donald Trump. Partially the policy stuff, but his behavior, all of his personal characteristics, just disgust me. And I always feared, you know, okay, it's one thing to have, you know, an extreme narcissist and someone who you know can't read anything more than one page and who has the attention span of a gnat is the most powerful person in the world. But, you know, other than we haven't had any major crises, you know, and in the US or around the world. And But I worried, wow, what happens if we do get hit by a crisis? Because this is an administration that is in no way capable of handling a crisis from the top person all the way on down. And I think we're seeing that right now. So I will tell you, the betting sites like predictit.org in the past month have the Trump's re-election going from a high 50% likelihood to about a mid 40% likelihood. I have personally wagered on that website that Trump is going to lose in November. So they cap your bet at $850. So I wasn't able to bet as much as I would like to. But if any of you, by the way, I do recommend, if you want to get sort of an objective market-based view on political matters, but they also track things beyond it, go to predictit.org. And they have hundreds of different bets on all sorts of different things. The ones I tend to follow are the political ones, but they have also economic ones as well. It's quite interesting. So my view is Joe Biden is roughly 90% likely to be the Democratic nominee, according to Predictit, and I think that's about right. It's almost certain. And right now, the odds sites have a Democrat, which 90% would be Biden, roughly 55-45 likely to be the next president. So that's what the odds sites say. I would put it a little bit higher, but look, the election's a toss-up. My preference would be a Democrat, any human being, other than Donald Trump, as our next president. And my view is look, I've had a lot of my Republican friends until a month ago were saying we're supporting Trump because they thought he was good for the markets, and they feared an Elizabeth Warren or a Bernie Sanders who would come in and really disrupt the business community, raise taxes dramatically, crack down on the whole financial system in a very onerous way. Joe Biden is much more centrist. And I actually, my Republican friends are saying, any Democrat would be horrible for the market. I completely disagree. And in fact, if you look at the last 100 years or so, the stock market consistently has done better under a Democratic president than a Republican president. Now, how much of that is causation versus correlation, is open to dispute. But this idea that's out there that, Biden is this lefty socialist who's going to, destroy business confidence, et cetera, I disagree with that. And I actually think the business community might sigh. A lot of my friends over the past month who were supporting Trump no longer are supporting him because they're seeing, what an absolute disaster he is during a crisis.
Any final questions before I wrap up? Okay, so do you have any kind of parting words of advice for us, just that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, look, I'll share a couple thoughts Warren Buffett generally shares when he speaks with students. So this is coming from him more than me. One of my favorite Buffett sayings is the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. In other words, your daily habits, whether what you eat, whether you exercise, whether you allocate your time sensibly, as opposed to just wasting it, how you treat other people, day in for one day, it doesn't really matter, right? But day in and day out, the core habits of your life will absolutely define you as a person and will define the trajectory of your life, will determine whether many, many, many years from now, how successful your career is, how many friends you have, whether the people, as Buffett says, whether the people who should love you do love you. Starting with your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your children, most importantly, right? But then going in circles beyond that to your friends and so forth. I know a lot of miserable rich people. It is not the key to happiness in life isn't how much money you make, but the quality of your relationships. And so having impeccable integrity is another habit, just always telling the truth. Those things start young, but again, to repeat what Buffett says, the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. In other words, it may seem like, oh, who cares if I just sit around and watch 6 hours of Netflix or play World of Warcraft or some stupid video game for 6 hours a day, and if I drink too much every weekend, and if I sort of treat people sort of crappy. It doesn't matter in the short term, and it doesn't. But if that's the way you behave day in and day out, I assure you that will define you and ruin you in the long term. So the second piece of wisdom, this comes more from Charlie Munger, which is just becoming a learning machine. I went to Harvard. I went to Harvard Business School. I was a smart kid, but I figured out the game. It was a game to me to figure out how I could get an A, the highest grade, while doing the least amount of work. And so I figured out the game. I figured out what professors looked for. I didn't do the reading. I sort of skimmed what I needed to do, took good notes in class, and I was, by figuring out the game, I was able to get the grades I wanted to get into the schools I wanted and get the jobs I wanted, et cetera. I look back on that with shame. What a total waste to go to Harvard and Harvard Business School and to coast along and not do the reading and not really engage. And fortunately, when I found something I was really passionate about, which is business, and then particularly investing, I changed. And the reason Warren Buffett is the world's greatest investor is he was super smart to begin with, and he had the right temperament. But at a very young age, he got really passionate about investing, and then he got on a super steep learning curve. And to all the way to today, at age 89, he is still on a super steep learning curve. So if you want to be successful, you find something you're passionate about, and the kind of thing you would do even if you weren't being paid to do it. And then get on a super steep learning curve and stay on that curve the rest of your life.
Okay, let's give Whitney a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. And by the way, I notice in the corner here, this is recording. I don't know if the recording of this is something you'd make that I could make public, because some of the things I've told you, some of my readers would love to watch a copy of this video. I don't know whether there are any policies about that, but we can swap some emails about that. In the meantime, momentarily, I will send you the link if you want to join my coronavirus or my investing email list. And I'm going to send you that article about traits of successful investors as well. So feel free to distribute.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And if you're ever in the UK, do think of us here at Coventry University. We'd love to welcome you for a visit.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All the best. Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.